We talk a lot about discrimination, the blatant kind, the you're not welcome here kind. But what about the discrimination that's baked into the system? The kind that's so ingrained we barely even notice it? That, my friends, is institutional discrimination. Imagine a workplace where, on the surface, everyone seems to be treated equally. But look closer. Notice how promotions seem to always go to people who look a certain way or come from a certain background. See how certain voices are heard louder than others, their ideas given more weight. It's not about individual prejudice, it's about systems and structures that disadvantage certain groups. It's about the unwritten rules, the unspoken biases that create an uneven playing field. And the worst part? It's often so normalized, so deeply embedded in the fabric of an organization that it becomes almost invisible. Institutional discrimination has very real consequences. It limits opportunities, stifles potential, and perpetuates inequalities. How does bias become so ingrained in a system? It's often subtle, like a slow drip, drip, drip of prejudice that seeps into everything. Think about hiring practices. A company might say they hire based on merit, but what if their definition of merit is unconsciously skewed? What if they're more likely to hire someone who reminds them of themselves? If a workplace culture is built on exclusion, if certain voices are consistently silenced or overlooked, then institutional discrimination thrives. Policies and procedures might seem neutral on paper, but if they disproportionately disadvantage certain groups, then they're part of the problem. Bias can become embedded in the very fabric of an organization. It's insidious, it's pervasive, and it's something we need to be actively fighting against. How do we spot institutional discrimination in the workplace? It's not always obvious, but there are red flags. Pay attention to who gets promoted. Is it always people from a certain demographic? Who has a seat at the table when decisions are being made? Is it a diverse group or a homogeneous one? Look at the representation within different departments and at different levels of seniority. Are certain groups consistently underrepresented in leadership positions? Data can also be revealing. Look at pay equity, hiring rates, and promotion statistics. Do they tell a story of equality or do they expose disparities? Real lives, real stories facing institutional discrimination. Let me tell you a story. A friend of mine, a brilliant software engineer, worked at a tech company. She was one of the few women and even fewer people of color in her department. She consistently received praise for her work, but when it came time for promotions, she was always passed over. Meanwhile, her male colleagues, some with less experience and fewer qualifications, were climbing the corporate ladder. When she raised concerns, she was told she wasn't ready or needed more experience. This is just one story, but it's a story that plays out time and again in workplaces around the world. Institutional discrimination is a lived reality for countless individuals. Time to act, building a more equitable future. So, what can we do? How do we dismantle these systems of oppression? It starts with awareness. We need to educate ourselves and others about institutional discrimination, to recognize its insidious nature, and to understand its impact. We need to challenge our own biases. We all have them, whether we realize it or not. Organizations need to take concrete steps to create more inclusive work environments. This means implementing diversity, equity, and inclusion training, reviewing and revising policies and procedures, and creating a culture where everyone feels safe, respected, and valued. It means holding leadership accountable for creating change, not just paying lip service to it. And it means listening to the experiences of marginalized employees and taking their concerns seriously. Let's dismantle institutional discrimination, brick by biased brick, and create a world where everyone has the chance to shine.